As the Washington Post put it, something amazing happened. The Senate passed a piece of legislation. It would extend the Bush tax cuts only for those making up to $250,000. They would expire for the richest Americans. The less amazing aspect of this, it doesn't mean much. Tax laws must originate in the House of Representatives, not the Senate. But still, as Republican Mitch McConnell put it, what today's votes are all about is showing the people who sent us here where we stand. Senator Rand Paul, a Republican, voted on the legislation. He's in Washington. Welcome.
Hello, good to be with you.
Good to have you with us. We heard what Mitch McConnell said. Why was this vote necessary in your mind?
Well, I think it's a mistake, to raise taxes on anybody when we're in the middle of a recession, and we're all interconnected. So if you raise taxes on people who are richer than you are, you work for them often. And a good example is a few years ago, the Democrats got all hot and heavy and they wanted to tax yachts, to tax those rich people who had yachts. Problem is the people who lost their jobs were the guys making $50,000, $60,000 a year building the yachts. So it doesn't work. You can't tax one segment and say, oh, we're going to punish rich people. We're all interconnected with them, and it punishes the economy is what it does, and it's a mistake.
You told Newsmax this is all moot because in the end you think President Obama will extend all the Bush tax cuts, even for the wealthiest Americans. Why do you feel that way?
Well, it's a prediction, so I could be wrong, but I think he will because last year he did the same thing. We ended up extending them for everyone, and the president said last year it's a mistake to raise taxes on people in a recession, and really our economic growth right now is slower than last year. Anybody who thinks we're not still in a recession, that we're not still struggling, that Americans aren't struggling, really isn't looking at the economy. So I think in the end the president will look at his electoral prospects slipping away this fall, and he may well come back to us in September, October, and go ahead and say, you know what, we shouldn't raise taxes now.
I think that most Americans know where both sides, Republicans and Democrats, stand on taxes. I think what most voters are frustrated about is that Congress isn't doing much. For example, this vote, it doesn't really mean anything because it won't go anywhere. They actually want Congress to do something.
Well, I think you're right, and I called the president 2 weeks ago and offered my services again. I'm willing to come to the White House. I'm willing to work with the president. I have no personal animosity for the president. I will work with him on reforming Social Security. Social Security is $6 trillion short. I will work with him on Medicare. Medicare's $35 to $40 trillion short. I have offered my services, but I get no phone calls back from the president.
Well, I think that most people think nothing actually will be accomplished until after the election is over in November.
You might be right, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And I'm willing to work with the president on this. I'm willing to work with the president on closing loopholes in the tax code. But the thing is, he has to come in from the campaign trail and talk to us. I'm willing to go to the White House. I have made repeated phone calls and letters to the White House, and I'm not getting any response.
I'd like to ask you about Mitt Romney. He's overseas now. He just met with the British Prime Minister. And did you hear about this latest flap?
Something about the Olympics. It didn't seem to be sort of a mountain out of a molehill. I didn't really quite grasp the significance.
Well, in a nutshell, Mitt Romney's talked about the security issues in London, something that we've all heard about, and he wondered if, I'm going to read you Mitt Romney's exact quote. This is what he told NBC News. He says, it's hard to know just how well it will turn out. He's talking about the Olympics. There were a few things that were disconcerting. The stories about the private security firm not having enough people, the supposed strike of the immigration and customs official. That obviously is not something which is encouraging because in the games there are three parts that make it successful, and security, of course, is one of the big parts. David Cameron took issue with that. Should he have?
Oh, I don't know. I think you take your life in your own hands when you go before London tabloids. So it's a dangerous occupation going over there and saying anything, probably. But no, I think a mountain out of a molehill. I don't really understand the tempest, really.
Well, this was David Cameron, the Prime Minister, not exactly the tabloids. And
I still don't understand it. It seems to me to be a non-issue, and we're really grasping for straws if that's what we're going to look at. I think really in our country, the big thing going on, and this is a pretty amazing thing, we're now enrolling more people to be disabled every month than we are enrolling to work. 70,000 people last month became disabled, and 60,000 people got a job. we've got real problems in our country with joblessness, with foreclosures. Look at Nevada. Look at the terrible things that are still going on in Nevada with unemployment over 10%. I mean, these are real problems, and whether or not, you know, some kind of accusations about whether the Olympics are being run smoothly in London, I think is a real non-issue.
Senator Paul, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.